Hi, good morning, everybody. I think we're ready to start. We've got a good number of people joining, and there's still some people coming in, but we'll crack on with the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning's webinar. This is the second part of our series of webinars focused on cybersecurity. Today's webinar is titled Protecting Your Company from Cybersecurity Threats by Implementing a Comprehensive Strategy. So today, both Anthony and Dean will be presenting to you. The session is going to be talking about why cybersecurity is so important, why businesses of all sizes are being subjected to cyber attacks, why cybercrime is on the increase, and most importantly, our 5-step guide to help you prepare for your cybersecurity plan and take you through those stages. As I mentioned earlier, today's second part webinar is part of our 3-part series. You can go in, if you missed part 1, we now have that available on demand on our YouTube channel. We will share the link for that with you during the course of this webinar in the Q&A. And you can also register for part 3, which we will be running on the 7th of June, which then concludes our 3-part stage journey of prepare, protect and respond. You can also register using the QR code on screen. And to accompany the series of webinars, we've also produced 3 eBooks, which go into a lot more detail and take you through stage by stage and step by step how you can prepare, plan and pull together your cybersecurity responses and preparation plans. So those eBooks are available to you. We will send out links for you following this webinar, and we'll be sharing those in the chat window today as well. And with that, I will introduce you to today's speakers. We have Anthony Owen joining us again. He is our Senior Security Solutions Specialist, and we'll be kicking off this morning with Dean Lewis giving an overview of our end-to-end security approach. And Dean is Head of Technical Strategy and Direction. And with that, I will hand over to Dean and let him carry on.
Thanks, Louise. Morning, everyone. Fine pair of haircuts indeed as well, if I do say. So hopefully I've got control. Let's test the technology. Yes. So I'm just going to start by giving you all an overview of CAE and who we are. I suspect that some of you will already know that, but we'll just cover that off. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our view and our vision of how we see security and how we believe that customers should address security through an end-to-end strategy. So a little bit about us. CAE are a purpose-driven organisation. We have a purpose which is to transform people's experiences and people's lives through technology. And we do this in a couple of ways, really. One is how we work with you. So making sure that we understand what you're trying to achieve, we align with that and work with you long term. A big part of how we like to work with our customers is around building trust, building those long-term relationships and helping you achieve the goals that you need to. One of the ways we do this, or a key way that we do this, is in specialising in the technologies, the technology solutions and the vendors that we work very closely with. And you can see our core partners on the screen there, and making sure that we're building the capabilities, bringing those skills and those capabilities to you to bear, so that not only are we working closely with you, but we're able to support you on your transformation journey. And some of our partners seem to think that we're quite good at this. So we've at a most recent Cisco Partner Summit, we won some awards, which we're really proud of, and we see this as reinforcement that we're doing the right things for us. The one I will pull out, because it's very relevant to today, is that we are the reigning Security Partner of the Year with Cisco, and we're really proud of that. So this diagram here is what we call our connected architecture. This is really laying out the technology platforms and how we bring that together into a single architecture to help our customers and enable our customers to deliver their transformation goals. You can see right at the center there is security, and security is absolutely foundational when we think about where we are, right now. The way that the threat landscape has changed, or has continually changed, but now it just seems more prevalent than ever to make sure that you have a security strategy that's right for your organization and delivers delivers against the risk appetite of your organization, because it is very much a risk-based discussion now around security. I think we're strong believers that there is always an ongoing threat. It is a case of expect that there will be threats, there will be attacks, there will be incidents, but do everything that you can to prepare, reduce and mitigate against those risks, against those threats as they occur. So we put security at the forefront of our connected architecture, which you can see is very much around hybrid, multi-cloud and delivering a network that connects throughout. And we power that through CAE Labs. CAE Labs is how we present our innovation. We do develop our own suite of apps that are there to augment the technology solutions that we provide to customers and add additional value. We like to look to innovate in those gaps between your need and what our technology partners can provide to make sure that you get a full end-to-end solution that delivers what you require. There we go. So security is more than just routine. It's essential to helping you have more good days. And more good days is something, hopefully, if you've heard from us before, that you've heard the term more good days. This is very much around us looking at how we can make people's days better. This very much aligns with our purpose and what we try to achieve as an organisation. And when we look at security specifically, okay, what is more good days? In everyone's mind, when we say what's a good day in security, right? Well, a good day in security is no incidents, no issues, no challenges. Yeah, of course, that's a good day. But actually, when you look beyond that, there's so much more to what is a good day in security. And that can be understanding what your threat landscape looks like, being comfortable that actually you're in a position that you feel that you are protecting your organization in the right way as a manager. As an operator, having a good day in security might be not having to sit there and look at 5 hours of very repetitive, mundane work that you need to do to ensure that you're doing those jobs like threat hunting, making sure that you're checking where your organization is at. Those things they can be quite mundane, they can be quite challenging, they can be from a mental aspects of that can be quite challenging. It can be quite boring, and we've seen that in the report that we've done recently, where feedback we had was that there were a lot of repetitive, boring tasks in security operations, and there are ways that you can look to make that better. From a user point of view, what's a good day in security? Well, as a user myself, a good day for me in security is one that everything works, and that's a very good day. But also that every time I want to do something, I don't have to go through layers and layers of checks and gates and balances to actually be able to do my job, right? So finding a good, strong balance between making sure our organization is secure, but actually empowering the users to actually do their job in the most frictionless way possible. So how do we look to achieve that? So we believe that, as I mentioned before, organizations should be thinking end-to-end when they think security. I think we've seen a lot in the past where security is maybe considered in isolation through point products that achieve a very specific, maybe tactical or technical outcome, be that buying a best-of-breed firewall or other security device or product to do a specific task extremely well. Now, that's great in an environment where you need a single product as a core to your security strategy. But in the modern world, those things have changed. People are working from everywhere, and we have people that are working remotely, working from home. Increasingly, we're seeing more people return to the office and commuting. So people are working back on trains, back in coffee shops. So you need to be able to empower people to work everywhere. That creates security challenges as well, because your threat landscape increases. You need to be able to protect those users wherever they are. You also need to be able to protect your data, your workloads, your applications, wherever that is. And as we know, there is cloud. there is hybrid cloud. Most organizations are in some form of multi-cloud or hybrid cloud journey where you have applications sitting in multiple areas, and you need to be able to protect those. You cannot do that by thinking about security in isolated instances or isolated products. You need to look at an end-to-end security. So how do we do that? We start with zero trust. Zero trust is it's a bit of an industry buzzword, so we feel it important to make sure that we define what we believe zero trust to be. And we define that as identity, compliance, and least privileged access. So what does that actually mean? Well, that means that we can know who you are. We can see that you're doing something we would expect you to do. And then we're able to give you what you need to do your job. And this really ties into what I said about users and making sure that they're having a good day, right? If you can get that right, you make their day very easy while protecting your organization. For us, we believe that security starts within the network, and having a secure way to connect your endpoints, to connect your users to your workload, your applications and your data, and protect everything at rest, but also protect it while it's in transit as well. And it's really important, again, to think about that as a holistic, overarching strategy, rather than try to pick off those issues, those challenges in a tactical way with point products. So we're really focusing on offering our customers the power of integration through a security platform, as opposed to looking at these things as isolated products, and being able to address those points and those areas and those elements of the architecture with a single or reduced set of security tools operating as a single platform is extremely powerful. And we see the benefits of that through talking to customers. And I'm sure that many of you on this call, if I was to ask you how many tools, security tools do you currently have, how many vendors, and I'm not going to steal Anthony's thunder, but he's got a fantastic slide on this in a bit. But constantly, continually get questions back like, well, I think it's 10, maybe it's 20, sometimes even more. Those tools, they don't necessarily talk to each other. They may contain different naming conventions. How do you know if you're dealing with what is a relatively minor incident, multiple incidents, or a single significant incident? And you need those tools to be able to communicate with each other and provide you with a single visible view on what's happening in your environment. And the way we do that is through an end-to-end security strategy with an integrated set of security operations tools. And you can see that at the bottom there, that underpins how you do that and deliver a effective, productive security operation across a set of tools, from XDR, MDR through to vulnerability management, cyber recovery. So covering the full prepare, protect and respond capability that's required for an end-to-end strategy. All of this is underpinned through Talos threat intelligence for us. Talos, to coin a term that's used by Cisco, is the largest non-governmental security threat intelligence organization on the planet. So when we're looking at an end-to-end security strategy, when we're underpinning that with Cisco technology, you're getting full access to that skill capability to support your platform and support your operations through taking their threat intelligence feeds, their information, and using that on your own environment to help augment your threat hunting capabilities and help you to respond or prepare and plan for those, any potential threats that may occur. And much of our strategy is really based on the feedback and information we got from yourselves, from our customers. We commissioned this report earlier this year, and we've released it. If you have read it, that's great. If you haven't, I really suggest that you go to our website, or you can scan the QR code that I can see on screen and go and read this report. It's got some really good information. And I think I started by talking about what is a good day in security. And we tried to take that approach with this report. We didn't want to put out a report that tells you that security is very important to people. I think everyone knows it's important. What we wanted to do is understand, okay, how is security and how is IT security in the industry affecting the people that are in it? So the users, the operators, the managers that are responsible for it. What's impacting them? What are their challenges? What are they seeing? What can help them to address security in a better way? And there's some really useful insights within that. If you haven't read it, please do. And just a little fact from our report there, you can see that 71% of respondents to our report agreed there are more issues surrounding ICT security than experienced before. And that's just not a surprise when we look at what's going on out there. We are seeing government threat actors. I saw a really interesting, it was a chart the other day where it was talking about the number of known attacks by professional ransomware organizations who are named, who have brands, who sell their services on places like the dark web. It's a professional business now, right? And I think that we need to make sure that we're doing things on our side to protect against those increasingly professional, well-organized and well-resourced organizations and individuals. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Anthony to take you through how we protect against that.
Well, I think I should have control back now. Cool, excellent. Yeah, thank you, Dean. Little introduction to myself. I'm Anthony Owen. I'm part of the pre-sales team here at CAE, and I'm effectively a security solutions specialist. My background is I spent 12 years in the RAF working on deployed secure communications, and after my time in the military, I moved into field engineering on security, and then eventually into pre-sales roles. So I've been doing pre-sales for about 7 years now. So having these talks with our customers around their existing kind of security concerns, what they believe their organizational risks are, what their exposure is to new and emerging threats, and I work with them on designing security solutions to really kind of help enhance their security posture and reduce administrative overhead for them. So why really do we need to have a security strategy? Like Dean alluded to, security is very, very complex. There's an awful lot of areas to implement. There's a multitude of different vendors to work with. There's so many different solutions out there, and all these different solutions have many, many different capabilities. So it's a case of where do you start? Problem here that is a security architecture can become so disjointed with using these kind of almost like piecemeal solutions that cracks can form. And the problem is that these cracks are what leave you at risk. So defining a kind of comprehensive strategy will help you seal those cracks and reduce that potential risk. So the plan is today, I'm going to look at some kind of key focus areas that you should really look at to use as building blocks when putting that security strategy together. Obviously, Dean went through the kind of end-to-end security strategy, and a real kind of key component of that under zero trust was identity. Now, the reason for this is that historic trends in security tend to point the attack spotlight towards more kind of senior execs in an organisation or specific roles such as finance, because these users had potential for more impact, such as financial gain. This isn't the case any longer. Threat actors will scour an infrastructure for any weaker point or crack, as I put it before, and use that as an entry point. The device type or the user is often irrelevant, as it's used as kind of a starting point, and the aim from there really is lateral movement within an organisation. So what we need to do is understand how a threat on a compromised host can move laterally. Historically, we'd look at VLAN implementation. That would be a traditional method. But in all honesty, VLAN hopping's not too complicated. It can be quite easily worked around. VRFs would be an improvement on this, but in a modern architecture, we want to put measures in place that include micro and macro segmentation, which would enforce kind of downloadable access control lists at the point where the user connects to the infrastructure. So that would be the physical switch port or over their wireless connection. And that will dictate how a device can communicate with the network, who it can communicate with, on what ports and what protocols. So a good example of how that segmentation will work is, historically we'd have a VLAN, say for building management systems. Now, moving towards kind of macro segmentation, that would be the group. We'd say, okay, it's a building management system. We want, if we want to move down to micro, which is really the kind of end goal for any organization, we'd say, okay, well, that building management system, what components have we got in there? We'd probably have a HVAC system, we'd have CCTV, we'd have door entry systems. In reality, we want to put measures in place that say, okay, well, our CCTV system, that doesn't need to have any form of communication with the HVAC system. So let's put those dynamic access control lists in place that say, well, we know that's a CCTV camera. It can communicate with one specific on-site IP address that's maybe a monitoring system, and it can communicate over HTTPS only, for example. We can go really granular, but the question is, how do we define this? So there's a few kind of building blocks to this. The first would be device profiling. We want to understand the type of devices that are connecting. We'd normally tend to do that with looking at the MAC address, for example. What vendor, what model have they got that mapped against? But then also let's look at the type of traffic that it sends. So what kind of broadcast traffic does it send? If it's a VoIP phone, for example, that's going to send specific VoIP orientated probes out to the network that we can then say, okay, through profiling, we know that is a VoIP handset. Next, we want to look at the posture of the devices. So the devices that are connected to our network, let's look at the operating system versions, the browser versions that they've got installed. Is the antivirus installed and up to date? Is the device firewall enabled? Are we only allowing trusted devices to access our infrastructure? If any of these kind of conditions aren't met, we want to enforce the user to kind of go through and update these elements before we permit access. Then we've got authentication. Now this is I would hope a kind of core component for everybody by now. We want to ensure that the user is who they say they are. So this is your good old-fashioned multi-factor authentication, username, password, biometrics, push notifications. In all honesty, where we are starting to see more of an industry trend to move away from passwords now, we're starting to see a lot more kind of passwordless authentication. Users have a smartphone, so yes, they have a username, but why not take some of that kind of password admin overhead off the IT teams and say, okay, well, we know that username has a registered trusted device that has a biometric scanner. So let's say, okay, their authentication mechanism is username biometrics. So that's potentially one to consider as well. And something that's often missed as well is geography. Let's factor in where your user base is located. Are you predominantly a UK-based organisation? Because if so, well, let's put measures in place to stop authentication from other geographic locations. Is it a case of we want to permit only Europe? Because then if we see authentication from, Middle East, anywhere else, we can say, okay, well, that's not a legitimate authentication request, even if it's authenticated. It could be compromised credentials of username and password, but because of the geographic location where a user's authenticating from, that could be an indication of compromise. So that's something that we want to factor all that in. Once we've gathered all that information, we can say, okay, well, we can trust that user, we can trust that device, and through our segmentation, we can now permit them access to the network, but only allow them access to what they need to actually complete their job. Okay, so for me, segmentation identity in a security architecture is probably the most powerful kind of component. So that's the real starting block. The next thing we want to consider is a real change in what our environments look like. And it's a little bit kind of a buzzword, but the perimeter's gone, and it couldn't be further. It couldn't be more accurate, in all honesty. I'd say probably 4 years ago, this was already starting. And then a little thing called COVID-19 happened, and it rapidly accelerated it. So, we had our kind of traditional architecture of branch sites that would traditionally connect over MPLS or maybe an IPsec VPN back to a headquarters site, maybe an on-premise data center as well. And you had remote workers who would connect in over an SSL VPN client back to a centralized location. And you would then have firewalls in place that would implement your security measures before direct internet access. Then COVID happened, and pretty much overnight, the landscape completely changed. Everybody started working remotely, and the applications and systems that traditionally were hosted in our on-premise data centers or in our headquarters have now moved to the cloud. So it's very, there's minimal kind of on-site implementation that you can carry out if you're using GCP or Azure or AWS. Your users are spread everywhere, and they're connecting all the time, quite often on devices that aren't necessarily managed, okay? You need to factor that in and make the decisions of, are we permitting BYOD devices? If we are we going to enforce any kind of posture capability on those? Because we don't want to introduce vulnerabilities, even though it is the user's own device. We still want to enforce that they carry out updates of OS, that we want to make sure that they have antivirus installed, for example. I mean, there's kind of a stack really of security elements that we want to factor in with this new kind of connect from anywhere, from any time architecture. Content services are a big one. If users are using corporate devices when they're working from home, we want to make sure that any of the content that they're accessing on that device adheres to corporate use policy. You'll have a VPN client, because quite often, we've got customers that have gone fully cloud. We've got customers that are working with a hybrid cloud. They've still got some kind of on-site footprint, for example, with a hybrid with on-prem. We will still need a VPN client on those trusted devices, those corporate managed devices, to enable secure kind of remote access. DNS security. So can we overlay a layer of protection where we look at the destination domain that the user is trying to access and say, okay, Talos threat intelligence, what do we know about that destination domain? Is it associated with crypto mining, phishing, ransomware, etc.? Because if we can block the user from actually reaching that domain, or we're going to take away some of the burden of, if they do download, a compromised file or anything malicious, we're not even letting the user get there. So it's taken away a bit of that stress there. DLP is another huge one to factor in as well. If users are working remotely and using all these kind of cloud-based applications, how do we make sure that they're not intentionally or unintentionally sharing any kind of personal identifiable information, any IP for the organization that we don't want to be shared within the public domain. Cloud delivered firewalls is another a real trend that we're seeing now. A lot of organizations are taking the firewall away from their sites and popping them into the cloud, and then having VPN connectivity into the cloud and having a centralized firewall capability before taking that step onto the kind of public web. So that's a real trend and something to factor in as well. Cloud malware analysis is another huge one. You've got your users uploading and modifying files. Traditionally, for a majority of our customers, this would be in OneDrive or SharePoint. Well, how do we know that they've not unintentionally introduced any form of malware into those files? We want to put measures in place that are going to scan those files when they've been modified, when they've been created, to make sure they're safe and benign before they're then shared with anybody else in the organization. And then we've got the identity side of things for public apps. It's very straightforward to build an architecture that's going to protect anything on premise when they're connecting, but we also need to factor in identity services for connecting to these cloud-based applications as well. So same kind of thing: profiling, posturing, geographic, everything I went over in the last slide. It's not just relevant for on premise. We want to factor this in the cloud as well. Next, we've got real-time intelligence. Now, I would hope that everybody's deployed solutions by now that are kind of adhere to this, but legacy style solutions, such as the old-fashioned AV antivirus, really relied upon databases of known threats and files introduced on the host would be matched against this database to see if they were benign or malicious. And another kind of traditional example would be an older-fashioned stateful firewall that just matches with permit and deny policies based on portal protocol or IP address. When it comes to the endpoint, the solution would only be reliable as its last update. And this didn't really scale because the number of threats that are introduced now on a daily basis is astronomical. And it's effectively always going to be out of date. Threats will quickly find a way around this. And it's the same with stateful firewalls, that you get polymorphic algorithms within threats now that effectively change their identity and their behavior. So unfortunately, threats are specifically designed to bypass security solutions. So what we need to be looking at is kind of real-time threat intelligence from Talos, and a kind of threat feed that comes down to your solutions in near real time. And that's going to look at the behavior and characteristics of any potential threats. It's going to say, is a file behaving in the way that we would expect it to for the specific file type that is? Does this file change its type of behavior? If it's been set on your host, what's it been doing for the last 3 weeks, acting totally benign, and then all of a sudden is it changing its behavior and trying to carry out a scan on your infrastructure, for example? What does it do? Where does it try and connect to? That can be a real kind of indication of potentially a potential threat. And the key one, solutions have got to work together. Real-time intelligence needs to be shared between the solutions in your stack. If a suspicious file hash or IP address, for example, is seen in one product, you want to have measures in place to block it, but you want to be able to block it quickly and efficiently throughout the solutions in your stack. You don't want to have to dive into 10 different platforms and 10 different dashboards to block one IP address. It's about kind of meshing them together to provide that real kind of integrated architecture. So that's a real one to consider. Next, we've got the right solutions for you. And this is one that I find from customers so often. There are so many vendors out there in the market, and they've got a plethora of different solutions. And let's be honest, pretty much all of them are going to say that their products are better than everybody else's. And the worst vendors out there are going to tell you that if you buy their product, you will never be breached and it's a silver bullet. And if any of those vendors speak to you, please run a mile, because it is not true. Like Dean mentioned earlier, the main goal of a security strategy is to understand that no organization in the world can say that they could never be breached. State-sponsored targeted attacks are a thing. And let's be honest, if you've got a government organization targeting you, they will find a way in. The main key here is to put measures in place that limit the potential impact of any breach. So we want to make sure that if there is an incident, you can still operate, or as an organization, you can then mitigate that threat, you can remove it and be up and running nice and quickly. The way to do this is to understand the capabilities that are available within your organization and how they work for your business. You want solutions that are going to provide as many capabilities as possible, don't really have a huge overlap, and that work well together. I would say that some areas of overlap are probably of benefit. A real key one here, I'd say, is probably email. Around 90% of incidents are initiated via email. It's by far and away the most common kind of attack method. So I would suggest for customers, most of them are using Microsoft Office 365. That has embedded email security, absolutely. But because it's such a kind of prominent attack vector, that's one area where I'd recommend overlaying a second solution if possible, because that's going to put you in a much stronger kind of position that if a threat were to bypass one of the vendors, the other vendor will pick it up. It's about working together. Effectively, it's about sensible use of budget against the likely risk. And then you've got management platforms. Now, this is probably a conversation I'd have 3 or 4 times a day with different organizations, a week, with different organizations. I speak to so many customers that say, right, we need to look at a SIEM. And then you dig a little deeper and you say, well, why is it you're looking to kind of implement a SIEM platform? Because essentially a SIEM is a log aggregator. And you dig a little bit deeper, and actually these customers, it's a small IT team. They've got loads of hats on. They're looking after server infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, the security stack. They're not SOC analysts. So they're not going to be sitting there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking at this massive kind of set of log entries and accurately know what those logs are telling them. What is the intelligence that's actually being presented to them? So in reality, what they're actually looking for is an XDR platform, something that's going to take all those log entries, simplify it into kind of human, I'm not saying SOC analysts aren't human, of course, but information that's easily readable and understandable. So it's going to be a case of the logs have said, okay, this is what I've seen, this is why I don't like it, this is where I've seen it, and this is the recommended actions you take to mitigate that risk. Okay, that is normally the kind of management platform, it turns out, that customers are looking for when they actually say they want a SIEM. And then we've got some customers that say, actually, you know, we're so stretched, we want a partner to be looking at this for us. We want somebody else to be looking at those logs and actively hunting for threats for us, to say, okay, well, you know, Talos have released a blog post about an emerging threat that they've seen. These are the observables, and they want a partner to go hunting within their infrastructure, doing managed detection and response, so MDR. So it's about understanding, really, as an organization, what is it we're looking for? And that kind of leads on to the response actions. This is going to boil down to effectively one of two paths. First path is the organization that is going to want best of breed across their security stack. They're going to want a SIEM platform for the log aggregation, and they have a team of SOC analysts responding to those logs. In reality, that's probably 10% of businesses that I speak to, or less. The remaining 90% have invested in a security architecture that they're pretty sure is protecting them against threats across a majority of their stack. They don't really monitor solutions actively, and in all honesty, they're not really sure about what the alerts are telling them. They rely on them just working, and that's not efficient, to be totally honest. We want to pull the telemetry into a platform that's going to inform them of what's going on in their environment. Data collected from all the solutions you're invested in. This isn't going to be restricted to a single vendor. There's solutions out there that can pull in this kind of data from a majority of the market leading security solutions, which effectively is at a high level what a SIEM platform is going to do for you. Now, the next step is where we get the intelligence overlay. This is normally done through some form of machine learning or artificial intelligence. And the way I like to describe this is your data is your individual jigsaw pieces, and your kind of actionable intelligence is where you take those jigsaw pieces and you put them into the bigger picture. So you can understand kind of end to end. Okay, yes, I've seen a potentially compromised file come into the infrastructure, and it will give you that kind of end-to-end description of, well, it came in via email from this user. It then was seen moving laterally from that host onto another host and onto a specific server, and now it's scanning your infrastructure. These are and this is what we recommend you do as next steps. It's a case of what's been seen, why we don't like it, and the actions you should take to remediate the threat. That's the kind of the security operations element. The way I like to kind of an analogy I put on this kind of end-to-end response is your different security solutions are the parts of the car. The AI is putting all those parts of your car together, and then when you have your kind of automated operations and response actions, that's taking that car, the Ferrari you've built, and taking it out on the track day and actually making the most use of it. So you've invested in the products, put a management platform together that will actually put the jigsaw pieces together for you, and then have the kind of the operations that are going to mean that you can automate everything. Well, not everything, but a majority. So it's going to take away that administrative overhead on your teams, really. Now, really, the last point I want to kind of cover off on what you should be evaluating for a strategy isn't one that anybody, in all honesty, ever really wants to have to look at. Historically, over the last few years, I'd say I was having conversations with businesses that were in the in the middle of an active incident, ransomware, for example, that would probably happen once every 4 to 6 months. There's an awful lot on social media at the moment. You looked on LinkedIn is a big one for it, around state-sponsored attacks and UK infrastructure that's kind of specifically being targeted. It's not media fluff, unfortunately. I had calls from 2 businesses last week alone that were in the middle of a breach. The real thing that needs to be factored in is incident response. Now, there are different angles towards incident response. You can have the case of you can pick up the phone to somebody in the event of a breach and say, can you come and help me? And it's a case of they will come and help you, but at the earliest opportunity that they have. There's no SLAs in place. Unfortunately for these businesses last week, the quickest they could get anybody to kind of come and help them was 2.5 days, and 2.5 days was to have an initial scoping call. That wasn't necessarily forming any form of kind of response. So you've got to factor in, if you're unable to operate as a business for 2 days, what's the financial impact of that? I would heavily lean towards an incident response retainer, because if you have a retainer, you have SLAs in place. I know Cisco have Talos as an incident response team. They can be supporting you within a 4-hour SLA in the event of a breach. So, we've put that segmentation in place. One segment, or kind of one micro segment of the organization is subject to it. Let's say, as an example, it's a ransomware campaign. You can have Talos come in and help you carry out the investigation, remove that threat, and make sure nothing else has been left behind. As that's on a retainer, if everything is wonderful and you don't have to call them in, it can help out with kind of simulating adversaries. You can have red teaming exercises. We can put together incident response playbooks and readiness assessments. So there's an awful lot that can be used from that investment. So incident response, I would say historically it was considered a nice to have. For me now, that is kind of right up front and center. For anybody I speak to, it needs to be factored in, not as a nice to have. It should be considered a compulsory from now on. And the next slide is the one Dean mentioned earlier on, why security is a nightmare. And it's that. For an organization to have to deal with that, I mean, that's the vendors that work in the different areas of security. That's not even the different solutions that they have. So if you think there's this many vendors, say on average each one of them has 5 different security solutions, and I know there are obviously vendors out there with significantly more. Where do you start? So we run security strategy workshops with our customers now. So when I sit down with our customers and run through them, there's some kind of key areas I want to focus on. Because at the end of the day, our aim is to help you put together a 3 to 5 year security strategy. We want to identify where you are now and where you want to get to. So the way we do that is we look at your current security capabilities. What are your current security solutions? How have they been implemented? And what are the capabilities that are available within those products? Okay, it might be a case of actually you've got some products in there that you're not very keen on, you don't have a great relationship with the vendor or the partner, you want them out and you want to identify what it is they're actually doing for you at the moment. So what do you need to replace? Okay, once we know what your current capabilities are, well, in fact, I'll come on to that. Some areas we want to focus on: existing solutions. We want to identify at a board level, what are the strategic directives? What is it they want to achieve? Is it a case of many more branch sites? Or could it be the complete opposite? They want to reduce the number of sites and move towards more remote working capabilities. Do they want to take an approach to cloud first adoption and get away from on-prem data centers? How can we help you use security technology as an enabler to the board directives? That's normally a real key drive for businesses. And finally, where's the stress for you? What's bothering you? peers in security talk to each other a lot? Is it a case of you know of another organisation in a similar geographical footprint, same industry, same same kind of size that's had a breach, and you want to understand what your potential risk is against that? That's what we want to try and help achieve. So that very fussy slide I showed you, and obviously Dean had the one earlier on, that was the end-to-end security strategy with Zero Trust. And what we do is we take that multitude of different vendors and we take it down to the key focus areas. So one I've picked here is Endpoint, for example. Obviously we'll have that for SASE and SD-WAN. We have it for networks and locations and for your cloud environment and workloads as well. But essentially, we want to look at the endpoint and say, okay, we can map this against specific frameworks and compliance requirements. But in essence, the way we tend to do this is, from our experience working with different vendors and different kind of security solutions, what capabilities can we put in place that will massively improve mean time to identify and mean time to remediate any potential threats? So we build out a list of capabilities and we do a gap analysis. So we say, okay, your organization at the moment with your existing security stack has capabilities mapped in green. The ones in orange would be a case of they have the products in place, essentially. It might need an uplift in the licensing type that they have, or it might need some tuning of the configuration and how it's been deployed, but that capability can be achieved. The red ones, it's not in place at the moment. There are no products within that architecture that can provide that capability. Because what we can then do is say, okay, we flagged that as a risk. This is what it leaves us at risk of, and we can present that to the board. We can present, we can log that in a risk register. So then, unfortunately, if anything untoward was happen, at least it's been flagged. But what it allows us to do is say, okay, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, how do we tailor solutions, tailor the architecture to move those reds and those ambers into greens to provide us with that end-to-end capability? Okay, so that's something we're doing with an awful lot of customers at the moment, and the feedback we're getting is very, very positive, because it's helping kind of teams within organizations align to the same strategy as well. It's quite common, you speak to the SecOps guys who are have a different vision to the InfoSec guys, but if we can bring them all into one room, sit them down and understand what it is that everybody's looking to achieve long term, we can get everybody on the same page. And I put together a document off the back of this that everybody can be working towards together. So it kind of brings some cohesion to the team. So if you'd like to book one of those, if anybody's got a smartphone with them with a QR scanner built in, you can scan that QR code there, and that will put you through to a form to book in one of those workshops. Or of course, drop us a phone call or an email, or into your account manager if you're already an existing CAE customer, and we can schedule one of those sessions in. But I think that's it from me. So is there any questions at all? Anything come in whilst I've been yapping away, Louise?
Thanks, Anthony. No, we've not had anything come in yet. For those who had joined us today, the live Q&A panel is open and it's active. If you do have a question, please do pop it into there, and we'll be able to respond to those. If you've got any further questions afterwards, you can always contact us. I'll be sharing a link in that chat window as well to the Envisioning Call page for anybody who wants to book in one of those. I can see somebody is typing in there, so we'll just give it a minute. There might be a bit of a time delay with questions coming through on that panel.
Yeah, no problem.
And just to confirm as well, for everybody on the call, we didn't mention this at the beginning, we have recorded today's session. So the recording will be emailed out to all of you afterwards with further information on the ebooks and the report as well. But you'll get the recording from today. Okay, there's nothing coming through on there in terms of Q&A. Dean, did you want to summarise anything? Was there anything particularly that Anthony mentioned that you wanted to call out before we close off?
Yeah, I think just call out that the environment, the architecture that you're protecting has been changing for a while. It's significantly changed over the last few years, but agree that COVID-19 has definitely accelerated that. It creates new complexities. Looking at the different components in a holistic structure, in the example that Anthony gave around endpoint, zero trust, and being able to kind of RAG status that and look at the areas where you can address. I think that helps you on that journey, because then if you look, when you talk about the architecture as a thing, as an entity, it just seems quite big and unruly, and it's kind of that. But actually, if you can break that down into different areas, and then you can break it down into its constituent parts and work out where your strengths and weaknesses are, it's just a nice, much easier way of managing change, managing how you move from where you are today to where you need to get to. And I think that starts with getting the key stakeholders in a room and actually understanding what you need from a security strategy, and helping you to get that down in black and white on paper or on a PDF maybe. It's the modern world. And taking that forward. And I think that's absolutely critical to see where you are now, where you need to get to, and then start to fill those gaps, because it just feels like such a huge challenge if you look at it in the broad sense, but taking it into those constituent parts and addressing them is a really powerful way of moving forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dean.
No problem. I don't have control, so Anthony, if you could move to the last slide, and then I will wrap up. So thanks very much. We don't have the QR code, but as I mentioned, this is part 2 of a 3-part series. If you're interested in understanding more around the respond and recover, please download the eBooks. But also sign up for the next webinar in the series, which will address that, and it's on Wednesday, the 7th of June. So thanks everyone for joining, and hope you have a happy Wednesday.